Hey, it's Aaron here with I Hate Republicrats. Today I want to talk to you about some of the policies of Ron Paul and how they're portrayed inaccurately in the media. One of the things that you'll hear said about Ron Paul's policies is that his foreign policy is somehow naive. And one of the things that's been used most recently as an example has been Iran. Uh, you know, Throughout the debates, Iran has come up over and over, and whenever Ron Paul speaks in Iran, he gets booed. At least that's what I've noted. He gets booed at these debates because I think that a lot of Republicans, they're neocons, they're hawks, and they seem very hungry to go to war with Iran. So let's talk about how our policies have impacted Iran and how we ended up in this scenario. In 1953, the CIA led a coup that overthrew a democratically elected government in Iran, and then after that, we propped up the Shah of Iran for the next 30 years, who was brutal, who was corrupt, who was oppressive to his people, and then after that period of 30 years, that led to, or nearly 30 years, that led to the Islamic Revolution, and then you had a small number of militant Islamic fundamentalists who had taken over the leadership of that country. And then what did that lead to? That led to the hostage scenario, right? And then we sent a mission of men in there to rescue those hostages. It went bad in the desert, and we lost a lot of guys from Delta that day, and that was an ugly day for Special Forces operations communities. So the one thing I'd say is that our foreign policy absolutely led us up to all of those events happening, and that was an interventionist foreign policy. So if somebody could explain to me how us overthrowing a democratically elected government, propping up a brutal dictator, and which ultimately led to an Islamic revolution. If somebody could explain to me how that would make us safer, I'd love to hear it. But unfortunately, the interventionist policies don't make us safer; they make us less safe. And that case in Iran is a perfect example. So let's talk about the war on drugs. You have the media come out and they say Ron Paul wants to end the war on drugs. This is a very dangerous domestic policy, if you will. Well, one, let's take a look at prohibition. If you go back, that's a perfect example of how the government trying to legislate morality creates all these unintended consequences that people need to be aware of. During Prohibition, they outlawed alcohol, and once they did, it gave rise to criminal gangs. It gave rise to the mafia, Al Capone. It gave rise to a lot of violence through a black market trade of alcohol. And the other thing it did is it made a real big number of Americans who were law-abiding citizens. It made them criminals. And as a libertarian, we disagree with government coercion, right? We don't think that government coercion is beneficial because you're not going to change the behavior of people just because you write something down on a piece of paper. Now, if Prohibition had created this scenario and gave rise to criminals and underworld organizations and gave them a lot of financial power, look at what it's doing now. Mexico's in the middle of a civil war. We've give billions of dollars to Mexico, to Colombia, to all these South American countries to try and combat this, and yet there are more drugs on the street today than there ever have been. And so, one, it gives rise to criminal gangs. Two, you can't legislate morality. Three, it's just been a financial failure. And we borrow 40% of what we spend a year. And since we do that, how can we borrow money to perpetuate something so ineffective? And then there's the the part of the story where the government itself has been the drug dealer. Barry Seal was flying in loads of cocaine for the DEA and for the CIA, and he had pictures of CIA spooks in Panama with Noriega loading up American C-130s of cocaine for the federal government. And, during the Ronald Reagan administration, they were importing metric tons of cocaine into Los Angeles and through a paid CIA operative. And then, look what came of that. They were using that money to fund an illegal war. When Congress had denied them funding, they backdoored Congress by selling drugs. And people tell me that Ronald Reagan was a patriot. Well, you tell me, violating the Constitution like that is about as far from patriotic as one can get from my perspective. So, when it comes to the war on drugs, it's ineffective. It hasn't worked. It's put a lot of money, of our money, out of our pockets, and it hasn't got us anything. So that's why the war on drugs is a complete failure.